Welcome to Mike for Men with your host, Mike Huey. Mike shares real talks for real men who want to make a real impact. Racial tensions are at an all-time high in the United States. In today's episode, Mike shares a different perspective on race problems and what you, as an individual man, can do about it. And now, your host, Mike Huey.
At the time of this recording, the trial that not just swept our city or our state, but the country and the globe recently closed up with a guilty verdict for Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer. Today I want to share with you why I do not think we have a race problem. Now that's a little bit of a marketing thing. Let me at least share a little bit so that it's not taken out of context. I do not think we have a race problem. We have a different problem. Let me illustrate. Bear with me for a second. First of all, if I told you I have a car problem, you would say, well, you've got a problem with your car, right? We don't have a problem with the street. We don't have a problem with the driver. We have a problem with the car. If I told you I have a marriage problem, we wouldn't say he's having struggles at work or the kids are bad. We would say he's got a problem with his marriage. The reason I do not think we have a race problem is there's nothing wrong with my race and there's nothing wrong with your race. The races are not the issue. They are what they are. Now, there was a group of people who used to think that there are problems with the races. They were called Nazis. If you were a Jew, that was a race. There was a problem. We had to annihilate that. I've been to the Holocaust Museum. I've not been to Germany yet, which I want to do someday. But I've been to the Holocaust Museum and spent days in Washington, D.C. going through, keeping that memory alive, that we cannot ever get to the point where we feel that there is one race better than the other and we're going to annihilate another race. There have always been problems. I believe that there's not a race issue. There's a culture issue. And let me illustrate. My great-great-grandparents were Germans, and they would not allow their daughter to marry the farmer next door because he was Irish. Same race, but internal conflict between they're not like us. My great-great-grandfather had a cultural problem of accepting Irish people. When I was in Rwanda, I went to the museum there that honored, or honored is the wrong word, kept in front of us the genocide of Rwanda. Same races, except there was one group that said, we think the Tutsi, which is a tribe, is not as good as us. We're going to eliminate them. Same race, cultural problem. You know that you have a cultural problem. Let's look at the police for right now. Not all police departments have a cultural problem, but some do. I mean, if you know you have a cultural problem in the police department, if you pull over a black man driving a BMW because it might not be his, he might have stolen it, versus a white man who is driving a BMW. There might be a cultural problem if you have a concern that there's a group of black guys hanging out at the corner, but you don't have that same concern when there's a group of white guys hanging out at the culture. In the outside of the police department, in our own culture, if you live in a neighborhood and you say those neighbors, you might have a cultural problem when you're referring to a family of a different race, whether it's a black family and you're referring to those neighbors because they're white or Hispanic or Asian, or you're in a white neighborhood and you say those neighbors because they're black, Hispanic, whatever that is, versus the people down at that house, or calling them radical concept, or calling them by name. You don't have a race issue, you have a culture issue if you believe or perpetuate that we don't need dads in our culture, and then we wonder why when these kids grow up and they're teenagers, they're carrying guns and they're in gangs. That's a culture issue. There's a culture issue if you're training your kids to go out and fight and kill police who are responsible with keeping the neighborhood safe. There might be a culture issue if you tell your kids to do well in school and to succeed is a white thing to do, and you don't want to be white. That's a culture problem. There's something wrong with your culture if you think every race should be the same. If you think races are the same, you have a culture problem, because races bring different foods and different music and different knowledge and wisdom. And so that we need to embrace the differences, right? There might be something wrong with your culture if you think all the races are not equal. There's a difference between equal and sameness, right? So I want to encourage you. You can change your culture. You can change what you say to your kids. You can change how they value other people. You can change what you say and do around coworkers, the culture of which you work. You can change your culture. You can expose yourself to other cultures and races. That's a radical idea, right? Hang out or go to a church or go to a grocery store in a different area of town, exposing yourself to different people, different races. You can change your family culture, what you teach about how to treat each other. You can change your family culture about what you're taught to how to live godly and law-abiding citizen to your children. You can change your family culture about what it is to have a work ethic and helping each other. I was sharing, I mentor a young man who's about 30 years old, happens to be black. We were talking, and when I exposed this idea, at first he was like, "Man, Mike, what are you talking about? Of course we have a race issue." Then I exposed to him the concept that nothing's wrong with races. What's wrong is our culture. And the positive thing is I can change my culture. I can't change my race, but I can change my culture. I can change my family culture. I can change my neighborhood culture. I can be a spark of changing the culture that I work with. One of the great things about peaceful demonstrations in the past, in the 60s, late 50s and 60s, some incredibly courageous black people said, "There's a problem with our culture. I'm going to do a sit-in because I should be able to sit at a restaurant and eat food just like anyone else." They were not attacking a race. They were attacking a culture. And so I want to encourage you to change your verbiage. Now, people say, "Mike, you're just mixing words." The issue is that we think in words. That's linguistics. If I say man, you think of something. If I say woman, you think of something else. We don't say, well, those are just words. No, they're actually communicating a concept. And saying that we have a race problem communicates something's either wrong with my race or something's wrong with the other race. I want to encourage us to start changing our verbiage and start saying we have a culture issue and I can change my culture. I can change my culture, and it starts with me. It starts between my ears. It starts with what I say to my spouse. It starts with what I say to my kids. It starts by me showing up to be with my kids. It starts by showing up of how I coach my kids and how I work and talk with my coworkers and how I get involved with political discussions. You can change your culture. When I shared that concept with the young man I'm mentoring, he got so excited because he said, "You're absolutely right. When I get married, when I have kids, I can change that. I don't have to perpetuate what my mom told me," because he grew up completely without a dad and ended up getting in all kinds of troubles because he didn't have a dad. He had a mom, but he didn't have a dad. And he said, "I can change that. I can change my culture. I can be a dad. I can encourage healthy living, godly living for my kids and my family. I can encourage us to have honor for one another, honor for our politicians, no matter what their party, honor for the police, no matter what you think about them, honor for our neighbors, no matter what their race is, honor for our coworkers and our bosses, no matter how wealthy or poor they are, we honor each other. I can develop that culture." And he was extremely excited, really encouraged. And so I want to encourage you. You don't have a race problem. But honestly, look at whether you have a culture problem, because the reality is none of us are perfect. So all of us have a cultural issue that we need to adjust somehow. It might be just how we think about ourselves. That might be an internal culture issue. We might have a culture issue about what we think of our spouse. Maybe we're not treating the spouse right. We have a culture issue about how we interact or work with other races. That's a culture issue that you can change.
Thank you for listening to Mike for Men. In the next episode, Mike reviews why socialism has not worked in countries around the world for the last 100 years and why it won't work today. If you enjoyed listening to this in a podcast, please subscribe and give us a review. If you are watching this video, please subscribe and click the bell below so you will know when the next episode comes out. If there is a topic you would like Mike or his guests to address, please write them in the comment section below. Again, thank you for listening.